At Thanksgiving, Dad sighed. You even sound like a therapist now. And I replied, good. Someone in this family has to talk about what's actually happening. The words came out before my brain could run them through the usual filters, like they'd been sitting behind my teeth waiting for their moment. His fork froze halfway from plate to mouth, a green bean dangling over the gravy. My mom's eyes snapped up from the bowl she was passing, hand hovering in midair between my brother and my sister-in-law. The clink and scrape of cutlery around the table slowed in this weird, almost comedy way, like everyone suddenly remembered they had hands. The smell of turkey and rosemary and burnt sweet potatoes felt too heavy in the air. My heart was pounding so loudly in my ears that I almost didn't hear my own next breath. It was one of those long, yellow-lit dining rooms where the overhead light makes everyone look more tired than they actually are. We were crammed around my parents' table. Me, 30F. My boyfriend Liam, 31M. My older brother Jake, 34M. His wife, their 2 kids, my parents, and my mom's sister, Aunt Carol, who was already 2 glasses of white wine in and doing that thing where she alternated between flirting with everyone and getting offended on principle. The TV in the living room was muted but still flashing highlights of the football game, like an impatient kid waving its arms. The good dishes were out, the ones with the little blue flowers on the edge. My mom had ironed the tablecloth. She does that every year, even though she complains about her back the whole time. I hadn't planned to say anything therapist-wise. I hadn't planned to say anything real at all. In the car on the way over, I told Liam, I'll just smile and nod, eat my mashed potatoes, and we'll leave before dessert. He squeezed my hand on the gearshift and said, and if it gets bad, we can fake an emergency. Your aunt is 2 sentences away from causing one anyway. We laughed, but my laugh had that hollow quality I recognize now as dread pretending to be humor. I started therapy in February, after having what I thought was a heart attack and what the urgent care doctor gently called a significant anxiety episode. Translation: panic attack so intense I thought my lungs had quit. I'd been sitting at my desk at work staring at an email from my mother that just said, call me. We need to talk about your tone yesterday. My fingers went numb, my vision got spotty, and 15 minutes later I was lying on an exam table with sticky pads on my chest, listening to a nurse ask, anyone in your family have anxiety? And realizing I had no idea because feelings weren't a thing we talked about. We talked about grades, weight, money, who had called whom, who had visited when. We didn't talk about the way my dad's voice could turn my stomach inside out, or how my mom used, after all we've done for you, like a blunt instrument, or how I could be in a room full of relatives and still feel like my real self was out in the driveway, waiting in the car. My therapist's name is Nadia. She has a plant in her office that I swear is doing better at coping than I am. The first session, she asked why I was there, and I said, I guess I'm just overwhelmed. Then I laughed and added, my mom would say I'm being dramatic. Nadia didn't laugh. She said, do you think you're being dramatic? The question hit me like a slap and a hug at the same time. It's terrifying when someone hands you a mirror you didn't ask for. I remember staring at my hands and saying, I don't know. I just know I feel like I can't breathe all the time, and I'm tired of feeling like it's my fault. We unpacked a lot in those first few months. How I was the good kid who never mouthed off. The one who got straight A's and still heard, why not a plus? How my brother could roll his eyes at my dad's jabs and somehow it bounced off. But when Dad made a joke about my thighs at a barbecue, it lived under my skin for 10 years. How my mom told the story at every family get-together of the time 4-year-old me threw a tantrum over the wrong color bowl, as proof that I'd always been sensitive. Nadia called it minimization and emotional invalidation, and a bunch of other words that sounded clinical and too big, and yet fit perfectly onto my memories like labels I didn't know I was allowed to use. She never once said my parents were bad people. She didn't have to. She just kept asking things like, where were you in that story? And if your friend told you that happened to them, what would you feel? So by the time Thanksgiving rolled around, I'd spent months learning how to notice my own internal reactions and practicing phrases like, I feel, and that doesn't work for me, in the safety of her office. Saying them at my parents' table is a whole different ballgame. The conversation that led up to Dad's "you sound like a therapist" comment started, as these things often do with something small. My niece accidentally spilled her juice on the tablecloth. She's 5, all limbs and eagerness. The cup tipped, the orange river flowed, and she immediately said, "Sorry, sorry. I'm so sorry." Voice high and panicky. "It's okay, sweetheart," I said automatically, reaching for napkins. "It was an accident." My mom swooped in from the kitchen and slapped napkins down too, but her mouth was tight. "This is why we don't play with cups," she scolded. "Look what you've done to Grandma's nice tablecloth." My niece's chin wobbled. "I said sorry," she whispered. "You're always saying sorry," Mom said, rolling her eyes. "Sorry doesn't clean the mess." Something inside me pinged like a fork hitting crystal. I recognized that tone so deeply it made my chest ache. It wasn't even a big blow-up. It was just the 1,000th paper cut. "It was an accident," I repeated a little more firmly. "We can clean it." I dabbed at the stain like I was absorbing some of the tension with each blot. Mom huffed. "You're going to spoil her," she said. "Kids need to learn to be careful." "She's 5, I said. She knocked over a cup. "She's not a criminal." Dad jumped in, sensing the shift like a shark smells blood. "Oh, here we go," he said. "Dr. Soff is in session. Next she'll be telling us we traumatized her with coasters." Everyone laughed, even Jake, though his was the tight kind. Liam shifted in his seat beside me, his thigh pressing reassuringly against mine under the table. "I'm not saying that," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "I'm just saying we can tell her it's okay. She's already apologizing 100 times. And what's wrong with teaching her to apologize?" Mom demanded. "At least she'll have some manners, unlike kids these days." Aunt Carol chimed in with, "In my day we would have gotten a slap for that and no one called social services." Then laughed like she'd said something edgy and brave. I felt my face get hot. I took a breath the way Nadia had taught me. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 6. "There's nothing wrong with apologizing," I said. But she looked scared. "Maybe we can just tell her she's not in trouble along with cleaning it up." Dad sighed, the long, theatrical kind he uses instead of rolling his eyes. "You even sound like a therapist now," he said, stuffing a forkful of turkey in his mouth. And that's when I replied, "Good. Someone in this family has to talk about what's actually happening." The silence after that felt like standing at the edge of a cliff I just accidentally stepped off. All the practice scripts in my head, "Never mind, I was just joking," "Forget I said anything," lined up waiting for their cue. Instead, Dad put his fork down with a little clank. "What's actually happening, then?" he asked. His tone had that dangerous calm, the one that means he's about to dismantle whatever you say. "Enlighten us." My pulse thudded in my throat. "Nothing huge," I said, though it felt huge. "Just, she made a mistake. She's already sorry. Maybe we don't need to make her feel worse about it." Mom crossed her arms. "No one is making her feel worse," she said. "You're the one dragging it out." We moved on. My niece was staring down at her plate, shoulders hunched. My nephew was quietly pushing peas into his mashed potatoes, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. "You moved on by making a joke about slapping kids," I said, meeting Aunt Carol's eye for a second. "Oh, for heaven's sake," Carol scoffed. "Everyone's suddenly so delicate." We all turned out fine. There it was, the family slogan. We turned out fine. My therapist's voice floated up in my head. "When you hear we turned out fine, whose definition of fine are we using?" I looked around the table. At my dad, who needed 2 beers just to relax before we ate. At my mom, whose I twitched whenever anyone challenged her. At Aunt Carol, who'd been divorced 3 times and started crying last Christmas because the turkey reminded her of her second husband for some reason. At Jake, who drank like he was trying to erase himself one swallow at a time. At me, with my racing heart and the tiny pill organizer in my purse. I thought, if this is fine, I don't want my niece and nephew to turn out fine. "It doesn't feel fine," I heard myself say quietly. "Not to me, anyway." Jake put his fork down too now, not aggressively, just slowly. Soft, he said, warning in his tone. Dad leaned back, eyes narrowing. Oh, here we go, he said. This is about your therapy, isn't it? He said the word like it had gluten and soy in it. What did she tell you? That we ruined your life because we told you to watch where you put your elbows on the table. Mom jumped in, as always. We did the best we could, she said, voice rising. We kept a roof over your head. We didn't leave. We didn't drink our money away. We were there. And now you sit there and act like we're monsters because we don't coddle a child over a spilt drink. My head was buzzing. The mashed potatoes on my plate congealed, untouched. Liam's hand slid to my knee under the table, grounding. I never said you were monsters, I said, and I could hear the tremor in my own voice. I said some things hurt. I'm trying to do better with the kids. That's all. You were saying we were bad parents, Dad snapped. You might not use the word, but that's what you mean. Do better, you said. Better than what? Than us. Yes. A small, exhausted part of me wanted to say. Instead, I took another breath. Different, I said. I'm trying to do different. Aunt Carol snorted. Different how? She said. By letting kids run wild? That's why no one respects their elders anymore. I almost laughed. My niece hadn't moved since the juice incident. She was about as wild as a houseplant. By letting them know they can make mistakes and still be loved, I said. The words surprised me as they came out. I hadn't consciously formed that sentence. It had been assembling itself quietly somewhere inside me. Mom's eyes filled up with tears instantly, like someone had turned on a tap. She's always been good at crying just enough to make you feel like the villain, but not enough to smear her mascara. Are you saying we didn't love you? She whispered. Here we were, the all-or-nothing intersection. Pointing out a bruise means denying the hug. No, I said louder than I meant to. No, I'm saying you loved me and you said things that made me feel like I was one mistake away from losing it. Drama, Dad muttered. Utter drama. Jake cleared his throat. Can we not do this at Thanksgiving? He said. He sounded tired. He always sounds tired now. I wanted to back down. The urge to back down is a physical thing, honestly. My whole body leans towards it like a plant towards the sun. But then I looked at my niece, still hunched, and my nephew, still hyper-focused on his peas, and I thought about how many dinners I'd sat through wishing someone would say something when I was the one shrinking in my chair. So I didn't back down. I didn't go for the jugular either. I just stayed. I get that you don't want to talk about it, I said to Jake. I don't really want to do this here either. But you all keep telling me I'm so therapist what every time I mention feelings. So maybe we should figure out why it bothers you so much. Dad shook his head, laughing angrily. Look at this, he said to the room. Our daughter, diagnosing everyone now. What's next, Sophie? You gonna tell us we're narcissists? Abusers. He made the words sound ridiculous, like punchlines. Nadia had warned me about this. When people have never been held accountable, even gentle reflection can feel like an attack, she'd said. I'm not here to diagnose you, I said. I'm just telling you my experience. And I'm allowed to have one that isn't everything was perfect. Mom sniffed. We never said it was perfect, she said. We said it was normal. Maybe you're the one who's not. That one hurt. I felt it in my stomach. Liam squeezed my knee. Maybe I am different, I said. I want things to change. That doesn't mean I hate you. It means I don't want to keep pretending stuff didn't hurt when it did. The room was so quiet I could hear the tick of the thermostat. Aunt Carol took a sip of wine, clearly regretting being seated this close to the blast radius. The kids had gone very still, eyes darting back and forth like they were watching a tennis match. Finally, Jake stood up. I'm going to take the kids to the living room, he said. Come on, guys. Let's see if the game's on. His jaw was tight, but there was something in his eyes when he looked at me. Not anger, something more complicated. They shuffled out, my niece casting one last uncertain glance at me. I smiled at her, trying to put in my eyes what I couldn't say in front of everyone. You're okay. You didn't do anything wrong. When they were gone, it was just the adults. The air changed again. Lighter, in that awful way things sometimes feel lighter when the witnesses are gone. Mom put her napkin down. I don't know what you want from us, she said. An apology? For raising you? For putting food in your mouth? For not divorcing your father so you could complain about that instead? I want you to stop acting like my feelings are attacks, I said. Came out steadier than I felt. When I say, this hurt me, I don't want to be told I'm dramatic or ungrateful. That's it. That's the big therapist agenda. Dad rolled his eyes so hard I'm surprised they didn't fall out. We did our best, he repeated. End of story. Except it isn't the end of the story. I'll be honest. I didn't win that conversation. There was no movie moment where my dad's face crumpled and he said, You're right. I'm so sorry. And we all hugged and the camera panned out over the turkey. Eventually, Mom started clearing plates with sharper than necessary movements, muttering about ruined holidays. And Dad turned the game back up in the living room. Liam and I left before dessert. In the car, I stared out the window at the dark, too tidy lawns and said, I shouldn't have said anything. He kept his hands at 10 and 2 on the wheel. You finally said something you've been swallowing for years, he replied. It was going to come out eventually. I'm just glad it came out in a sentence, not in an ambulance. I laughed a little at that, even though it didn't feel funny. I told Nadia about it at our next session, picking at a loose thread on her throw pillow until I almost unraveled the whole thing. I think I made everything worse, I said. Now they really think I'm brainwashed. My dad kept calling me Dear Phil for the rest of dinner. What does worse mean? She asked. More tense, I said. More conflict. Less pretending everything is fine. She nodded. That's often what better feels like at first, she said. I stared at her. I don't feel better, I said. I feel like I swallowed a brick. She smiled. Better and comfortable are not the same thing, she said. You stepped out of a role you've played your whole life. The system will push back. This system sucks, I muttered. Yes, she said, totally serious. It does. Since Thanksgiving, things have been weird. My mom has sent a few texts like, I'm sorry if we upset you, which is not the same as I'm sorry we upset you. But hey, it's a syllable closer. My dad has made a couple of snide comments about me, taking notes for my next session, when I'm just sitting there scrolling on my phone. Jake hasn't brought it up directly, but he started calling me more, late at night, talking about work stress, in a way that suspiciously rhymes with burnout and unresolved childhood crap. Here's what I do know. My niece has stopped saying sorry 15 times in a row when she spills something. She says it once and then she helps clean up. The last time she was at our apartment, she knocked over her juice again, froze, and then looked at me. I said, Oops, that happens, and handed her a towel. She breathed. I watched her shoulders actually go down. Later, I heard her telling her little brother, Auntie Soph says accidents happen and we can fix them. That felt like something. Small, almost invisible, but still. I also know that when my dad sighed at Thanksgiving and said I sounded like a therapist, what he meant was, You're using language that forces me to look at things I'd rather keep blurry. And my answer, good. Someone in this family has to talk about what's actually happening. Wasn't about me thinking I'm smarter or better. It was about being so exhausted by the gap between what we pretend and what we feel that I was willing, for once, to be the awkward one at the table. I don't think everyone needs therapy. I'm not out here evangelizing to strangers on the bus. But in my family, someone needed to learn how to say, that hurt, without turning it into a joke immediately. Someone needed to ask, why do our kids apologize like they're afraid of disappearing? Someone needed to break the rule that says we're only allowed to talk about the past if we do it with a smile and a tagline about turning out fine. If that makes me sound like a therapist, I'm okay with that. Therapists actually listen when you talk about what happened and don't respond with, You're so dramatic. They don't keep score of everything they've done for you and use it as a shield against any criticism. They don't call you ungrateful for wanting your nervous system to stop living in 1999. So yeah, at Thanksgiving, My dad sighed and accused me of sounding like a therapist, like that was an insult. And I replied, without thinking, that someone in this family had to talk about what's actually happening. I think that someone is just me saying out loud all the things kid me wished an adult would say at that table. Even if the adults at the table still roll their eyes. Even if my voice shakes. Even if my dad turns the game up to drown it out. Because my niece heard me. And, for the first time in a long time, I heard me too.